the more I learned and performed and went to improv festivals was just the like deep instantaneous connection you build with these peoples because it's such a vulnerable art form because you are bringing yourself to the stage. You don't have a script, you don't have a character necessarily. It's just you and the other people on stage, and there has to be a really deep level of trust to be able to feel comfortable up there with them and know that you're taking care of and you're taking care of them and vice versa. And so even within my group in Munich, we noticed how the mindset shift was seeping over into our workplaces and into our own personal and professional lives.
Hello and welcome to Rediscovering Connection. I am Shelley Doyle. This is my first recording of 2025 on a full moon. And January is, I don't know about you, but it always a little bit tough for me. I have siblings spread across the world, and three of us have birthdays within 8 days of each other. And I'm never together with them. The last time we were all together was 8 years ago. So it's been a long time. And I did catch a little bit of the Mark Zuckerberg interview with Joe Rogan at the weekend and talking about our imagined hybrid future and about us kind of having holograph versions of our friends and family teleporting in to play cards together. I've heard a lot of critique of his vision. People are saying that no one's asking for this, but as someone who's quite nomadic, I move around a lot, my favorite humans aren't always near me or around me. So I can't help but be a little bit excited about this idea of the future. Brett Macdonald is my guest today, and thankfully she is near me. She's here in Victoria, BC. I was so thrilled to be invited to an event that Brett hosted yesterday, doing our goals and vision for 2025 with a bunch of amazing, brilliant professional and personal contacts from across Victoria. I came out with a beautiful vision board. It was a brilliant way to spend a couple of hours on a Sunday sipping tea and eating sushi and doing our vision board. So Brett's here with me today. She's a former teacher, improv expert, workshop facilitator, and really helping organizations to bring their teams together in a more joyful way, a very different way than they've probably experienced before. I've been blessed to experience Brett's work at multiple big events in Victoria, TEDx, Disrupt HR, all sorts. So brilliant to have you here today, Brett. Welcome. How is your Monday feeling so far? How is 2025 feeling for you so far?
Thank you so much, Shelley. I'm really touched that to be here today, and I think it's so neat that we spent yesterday together as well. 2025 is, I think the beginning of years are always, it's this like feeling of you have, like, oh, here I go. I've got to like restart everything. But I'm just sort of, I'm imagining I'm on one of those little lazy rivers on my little inner tube, and I'm just coasting along and being like, look at that cool tree. Look at that interesting person. So it's good.
Mindfully flowing into the year. I love this. Something that we touched on yesterday was about our international experiences. So perhaps before we delve into what you're doing today, I'd love to just get a sense of your journey to here and how kind of those expatriate experience have really shaped your path.
Yeah, yeah. So I actually have been a bit of a traveler for since I was a child. My parents worked for a nonprofit organization in Canada called CUSO, and so we actually lived in Mozambique for 3 years when I was 3 to 6 years old. So this kind of international curiosity was always ingrained in me. So after I finished training as a teacher, I ended up getting a job in Scotland, and so my first 2 years of teaching were in Scotland. And from there, I moved over to Berlin in Germany for a couple years and then down to Munich, where I settled for 7 years. So I was away for 11 years and returned back here in 2016, which created a pivot moment for me where it was a little bit of coming home, but also, I left as a student and I came back as an adult. And so Victoria was a very different city to me. Also, it was 11 years later, so things had changed. It was also a time where I realized I didn't want to full-time teach anymore. There was something else that was bubbling up inside of me to explore. So that's what I then took that time to teach part-time and start exploring what it was I wanted to do. Something else with my life. What else did I want to try besides teaching? I guess that's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I love it. And
Yeah.
something that's just coming up to me, and we'll talk about kind of your improv work, but
Yeah.
um, I know in my conversation with Dr. Robin Dunbar a year and a half ago, he just mentioned about when you have something in common with someone, like if you've visited the same place or if you've got a person in common, um, there's something called dyadic closure, and it just helps to ignite that spark. And not long after we met and we connected on LinkedIn, I noticed that you were connected with a former colleague of mine called Alex Menhams, who has shifted from corporate into improv. And it was like, almost, even though we didn't know each other very well, just seeing that international connection with someone that I knew quite well from the UK definitely just helped to form that connectedness between us.
Yeah.
Yeah, so let's talk about improv and like how this has like really shifted things for you, and how this really helps you to bring joy and connection into the lives of whoever participates in your sessions.
Yeah. So I'll say my history with improv is I grew up as a theater kid. I was on stage doing musicals. I actually studied theater before education, and part of it was an improv course. And I left theater aside then and moved on to education and teaching. But when I was living in Berlin, I rediscovered improv there and took an English course in improv, and it had a performance element. And that was where I was like, this feels good. And so it led into me co-founding a group in Munich, and that went on. They're still going, though many of us have moved on. And what I noticed, the more I learned and performed and went to improv festivals, was just the like deep instantaneous connection you build with these peoples, because it's such a it can it can be a very sort of vulnerable art form, because you are bringing yourself to the stage. You don't have a script, you don't have a character necessarily. It's just you and the other people on stage, and there has to be a really deep level of trust to be able to feel comfortable up there with them and know that you're taking care of and you're taking care of them and vice versa. And so we, even within my group in Munich, we noticed how the mindset shift was seeping over into our workplaces and into our own personal and professional lives. So when I moved back to Canada, that was where the idea kind of started of like, how do I just want to spread this and share this with other people without the performance element. You don't need to get on stage and perform at all. I just want people to experience that joy and that connection and that like slight vulnerability that we can all have together to deepen that connection. And even if you're not aiming for the comedy or performing, there is still such a sense of joyousness within all improv
Mm,
games, I find, because you're letting go, you're stretching
mm.
your comfort zone, and you're having this shared experience of like nerves, which just leads into bubbles of laughter.
Yes, so much yes to that. There's two things that really come up for me there. The shared experience, and I think this is so important. And whether it's, I don't know if any of your delivery is actually virtual, so maybe we can touch on that. But the idea of shared experiences, and especially when people are going back to their offices, like maybe 1 or 2 days a week, and when they're there, half of their colleagues aren't there because they're working from home. And it's like the importance of creating these shared experiences every so often to just help bring our teams together, and then have a memory, have like a core memory
Yeah.
to think back to how silly you allowed yourself to be in the company of your colleagues, and then maybe you'll be in a really serious meeting, but you've still got that knowing that that colleague has like a silly side to them, and you
Yeah.
just see a different side that, yeah, is a bit more a bit different to just having a drink down the pub.
Yes, yeah, exactly. And one of my recent clients right before Christmas, he said it perfectly. It was a governmental adjacent organization, and it was all of their staff together in the room, and we worked together for 2 hours. And at the end of it, he said he was, he was really impressed with just how engaged everybody was. But one comment really stood out to me, which was we laugh together. Like it's not like we don't laugh, but he said, I haven't seen us laugh like that together in I don't know how long. And I think that's it too. We all have a good laugh every now and again, but to have those like uproarious, almost like tear-filled laughters where people are like, my cheeks hurt from laughing. And it's only because they're together. They're not watching something together. They're engaging in it together. And yeah, to that shared experience, I've been doing some research into laughter and the benefits of it. And of course, there's all the known benefits of your heart rate and uplifting things and everything. But there's also evidence now of this shared laughter deepening connections, not shared as in watching something together, but actually sharing it together, and that itself builds trust amongst people. And I just think that's so special. And I can't wait to learn more about that too, because I agree. I think it's beautiful.
Love that so much. One thing that you mentioned yesterday was your personal mission to bring joy into your own daily life. And
Yeah.
I think that was so interesting, just knowing your work is really helping to bring joy into the lives of your clients and participants. And uh, we spoke also about the idea that we teach what we need to learn. So I wonder if there's just anything coming up for you there, that why you're feeling this calling to bring joy to others, and like how important it is to see yourself as an other, as an important person in your life that you also want to help share laughter with others.
Yeah, definitely. I think two things. One is something that I've been working on for a few years and researching and doing work with is the idea of self-compassion and being aware of my own needs and being okay with taking care of myself while also taking care of others. And so I think what I noticed, having really gone full bore into building my business over the last year and a half, is I think I forgot to bring joy to myself. Like I love doing what I do and coming into organizations and helping other people. And then I started looking around my house and being like, there's all these puzzles I haven't done, and my guitar I haven't been playing, and that crochet project, and that all these different things. And so I thought this year, and I noticed that. I just noticed that in myself that I was missing those like little sparks of excitement that I get in my workshops and I see other people get. And I thought, what about I need to feel that too? Because if I feel that, that's just going to benefit my workshop participants even more as well. And it's a journey. And we talked about that yesterday, that we are, I'm doing it because I love helping other people come to these realizations, but I also love coming to these realizations myself and learning as I go too. So, yeah.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I'm there with you on this journey of knowing that we teach what we need to learn. And I watched back just a couple of my interviews over the break, and one of them I was saying like hand on heart, like I feel connected and supported where I am right now. And it's like on that day that I did that recording, I felt that way. And that's not to say that 2 weeks later I feel exactly the same way, because maybe I haven't been connecting outside of my bubble as much as I want to, because I have very demanding children, and I just don't have the capacity when they're here full time to actually connect with the people that I really want to and have those nutritious conversations that you can like go over an hour if you feel compelled to, because you've got the spaciousness. So I know I need to do more of the work in my own life, and I've got, like I said, I've got amazing contacts all around the world, but it's really carving out the time and the intention to reconnect so that we do feel connected. And some of the times I'll reconnect and I'll have these like big realizations. And sometimes it can take a lot of energy to reconnect with people.
Yeah.
And then you have like an amazing hour together, and you're like, wow, I really feel like our relationship is like back on track. And then again another 6 months go by and you're like, damn it, I did the work to get us back together, and then the follow up wasn't there. So it's about how do we get regularity back into those connections, whether that's like once a year or once a quarter or whatever, and sensing that. So that's part of my work and my own personal journey to feel connected to my people around the world. So a little bit of an insight into me. So we spoke about moving,
Mm.
before. So you've lived in Scotland and in Germany, and I wonder how your feeling of connectedness was in these places around the world. And I dare say, like the environments, like if you're teaching in Scotland, you're like moving into like a whole community of people. So you kind of have those people naturally around you. So I wonder how your feelings of connection was in these different places around the world.
Yeah. Oh, that's a great question. And it's just made me come to a realization that I had two very different experiences in Scotland versus in Germany. In Scotland, I moved there with one of my good friends from here. We both graduated. She's a McLeod, I'm a McDonald. We were like, we're going to Scotland to conquer the Macs. And we moved to a very small town in the Scottish borders. And so there was no other international people there. I have an article still of us on the front of the local newspaper with our Canadian flag. We really stood out. And we were lucky we had each other, and we loved road tripping all over Scotland, all over the UK, really. But it took us a while to break into the local community. Like any small town, you need an inn, and we finally got an inn. And even though we were both working in schools, that was one way in, but it was the inn to the local, the rugby people, the local theater people, and we were only there for 2 years, but we made, I still have close friends that I catch up with every time I go back. And so that was one community of really breaking into the local. And once I moved to Germany, I was working in international schools. So I was joining into schools that were full of expats. And so you had this instantaneous group of like 10 to 20, however many friends you want. And you were working very intensely within the schools as well. And it wasn't so much about getting into the local community, partly because of the language barrier as well. So that made it tricky. But I think in terms of connections, again, I think there is something to it was, kind of the formative years of my life. I was into my 20s into my 30s while I lived there, and I was really coming into myself and learning who I was as a person and who I wanted around me. And the expat community is just so special. I think in many places. I think in Asia, it's even more unique. It's much more intense there, but even in Europe, to be with all these international people who just want to know other international people, you instantaneously have such neat bonds because everyone's so curious about each other and curious about how we work and what our cultural differences are and similarities, and whether it was the theater groups I joined or the schools I was a part of. And then of course I used a lot of like meetup.com was really big back then, and there was a thing called internations. I don't know if you know that. It was a professional international one. And yeah, oh, in fact, I think you're kind of active on the internations here, aren't you?
A little bit, a
A
little
little
bit.
bit.
Hmm.
Yeah, I've been so curious because it was such a big part of a couple of years in Munich for me, but I just feel it would be different. So to wrap it up, I'll say when I moved back to Canada, it was a real seeking of whether it was international people or people who had lived internationally. Like those were the people I wanted to connect with here because I didn't want to lose that huge part of my life, that international mindset and experience. So yeah,
Mm, yeah. And the repatriation, I hear again and again, is almost harder than the expatriate adventure because you come back and maybe your old friends and connections, like they're expecting the old version of you to return. And you're like, oh, hey guys, like, oh no, this is the new me.
yeah.
And maybe your wavelengths are somewhat different, and the expectation of falling back into old folds maybe doesn't feel as natural as you anticipated that it might. I wonder if you've got anything
Yeah.
that you want to share on that repatriation part of your journey.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say that reverse culture shock is a real thing. Like I said, I was gone for 11 years, and Germany is a very different type of culture. Even Scotland's a lot different than living in Canada. I mean, you would know UK to Canada differences too, of course. Um, there were friends that I had left from university here who, have never left, and they've gotten married and had kids, and my partner and I have chosen not to have kids, so I came back, just the two of us. And I think one bonus I have is that my partner is from Germany. I met him there. He's very international as well, and he was super excited to move to Canada. And so I had this person in my house literally who I could talk to about the trips we did and the travels we did, and we could analyze the way that Canadians do things and laugh about moments where everyone's apologizing over the most, where we are standing in line at the grocery store, and we just thought it was hilarious. And I think I was really lucky in that way, but I found it hard. There were things that I missed from Germany, and I think, of course, the biggest thing I missed were my friends. All my close friends still, most of my close friends live in Europe, or they've left Europe and gone back to Australia or wherever. And so there was this real longing too of like, how am I possibly going to make new friends to that level again? Is that even possible? And am I okay with that? And um yeah. And then I think just getting used to how things are done here. It's a lot gentler and kind of easygoing, and Germans will say it like it is. And there's a reason I left Germany though too. I was ready to come back to friendly, kind of surface level, bubbly people too. I needed to get back into that for my own mental health as well. So it's a mixed bag. It's a hard question to answer in
Yeah, yeah,
a holistic way.
totally.
I hope that makes sense.
Like
Yeah.
there's the word that's coming to mind is banter. Like in the
Yeah.
UK, like you have banter, like you take the mickey out of each other, and it feels like that doesn't really happen here. Like it feels like it could be taken in the wrong way.
Yes. Yeah. And I think that's part of like I love going back to Scotland and the UK because I miss things like real banter and just I feel like when I was living in Scotland, I always say it was a good ease into Germany because already in Scotland, people were definitely more upfront with what they were saying, and they just say things like it is, and but with this real like sense of humor and stuff. And then you get to Germany and they've lost the humor aspect mostly. I just of course jokingly, but it's very, straightforward there. And so it was a nice ease. So I definitely miss that. I will say from Germany to Canada, there's a lot more banter here. Germans don't really banter. It's not really, in my experience, it's not my American friend and I would talk about that in Germany, how we miss that just like boom, 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 that funny banter. So you definitely get more of it here, but I totally see what you mean that it's nothing compared to to the UK.
What I love about the German language is some of the phrases. My favorite German phrase is Kopfkino. Have you heard of this one?
I can translate it to what it means.
Yeah,
I don't
so
know if I've heard of
cinema in your mind. So if you're just
that.
going off on a tangent and someone would be like, so you're having a Kopfkino moment right now.
Yeah.
Like this is not happening anywhere else except for your mind. Like, oh
Yes.
my gosh, it's just not something that we necessarily would say in the UK. So
Yeah.
my former boss was German. So I had 4 years of working side by side and learning some of these phrases to just throw into
Yeah.
our conversations, which always brought him a little bit of joy that I would take the effort to learn a few bits and pieces in German.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
So we mentioned about you having connections all around the world, and I know about your in-person delivery. Do you do much virtual? And do you enjoy doing like your work in a virtual environment? How is that received?
Yeah. Yeah, it's great. It really picked up over the pandemic. I was still building my business at that point, and there's a network out there called the Applied Improv Network, which is all people like me who are using improv and applying it in different situations, medical fields, politics, all sorts of industries. And so they all hopped online at the beginning of the pandemic and were like, how do we do this virtual? So I got thrown right into it there. And so, yeah, I did a fair amount of virtual during the pandemic. I worked with library federations around BC actually, because they were learning how to put their programming online and how to use Zoom. And so I would do workshops for them on some of the basic tools of Zoom, and then also some games and exercises they could use. And we talked a lot about connection before content. That was kind of the biggest theme was it's not just about getting people like a normal space, but getting people in the Zoom room. We need to get them connected because you're all sitting in your own little bubbles. So that was great. So I think that's still when I do virtual ones, which I do every now and again, I use the breakout rooms because I want people to connect, and we still do it through improv games and getting to know each other, kind of prompt questions and such. Because I want to prove that it is possible. I know there's people who are doing it tremendously better than I am, but I want to show that even just the simplest way you can build that connection within there.
Totally, totally. And I did do a one-to-one session with Alex
Oh
Menums
yeah.
a couple of years ago now. And it was what I found really interesting was the invitation and ability to play with our emotions in like a safe setting. So he was like giving me a present, like a pretend present through the screen, and then saying, like, when you receive this, you're going to be really unhappy. Like you're going to be it's not going to be what you wanted at all. And then it's like playing with like my like maybe I'm going to hide the unhappiness, but still like feel it. And that's it. You feel the emotions. So
Yeah.
that I found I'm like, I want to find some way to do kind of authentic improv. And it was like, well, this kind of is because we're authentically feeling the feelings,
Yeah.
even though it's a curated fictional scenario that's being presented to us. So I found that so intriguing. So I want to do some more improv. For
Yeah.
sure, for sure.
And
And
I
the
want to say, can I
yeah,
jump in and say one thing? Because
yes,
I want to clarify, because I love what you said about doing that. Now, I've forgotten the word you used, but that sort of authentic improv. And this is something I really try to explain to people right off the bat, because I think a lot of people, especially North Americans, only know improv as like the show Whose Line Is It Anyway?
yes.
Which is all very, I mean, those guys are unbelievable. They're so talented. They've been doing it for decades. And it's a very curated, performative, comedy focused format. And so I think a lot of people think of improv as improv comedy, and many people call it improv comedy, and that it's all about the laugh and the joke and so on. And I always try to let people know there's a whole other side of improv, which still has a layer of comedy because it's all, discovered on the spot and spontaneous. So you're going to have comedy in it, but it is genre focused. It is truthful. It can make you cry. It can make you feel scared. It can make you feel all the other emotions beyond just a laugh. And what it's really about is hitting on human experiences and that relatability where you're watching something and you're like that, wow, I know exactly what that feels like and whatever emotion it brings up. And that's the world of improv that I love to live in. I call it narrative improv. That's not the technical name, but it's more about the stories and the relationships and the people that are in there and what's happening. And the exercises to get to that place are similar as to the comedy place, but there's a different intention there where it's a human sense. One of my favorite tools when I'm performing improv is if I don't know what to say, I just state what I'm feeling in that moment. Like I might actually just
Mm.
say, I don't know what to say. And that's a gift to my partner because they're going to be like, one, I know Brett the improviser is feeling lost. And two, I'm going to use that as my gift for my next line. So yeah, I
Mm.
love what you just said. Because that is a huge part of improv. And I think many, if not most people don't understand that or know that yet.
And that's bringing up something quite profound for me. One of my earliest podcast interviews is with a brilliant coach called Kirsten Barfoot, and she does in her coaching work when she was starting out. She had an experience with a client, and she didn't know what to say after her client had revealed something, and she spoke that. She just said, "I don't know what to say." And that honesty in her saying that created an aha moment for her client. So it's like
Right.
us being truthful. We don't know what to say in this moment or how I'm feeling in this moment helps others have breakthroughs.
Yeah. Yeah. It takes away that need to be forced to say something or like scramble for something, whether it's a moment of silence or it's a moment of I don't know what to say. Yeah.
And I feel like this podcast journey is helping with that because we
Mm.
give each other grace. Like if we don't know what to say, I might just pause and edit something out later. But in the boardroom where I come from a very corporate environment, if I didn't know what to say, I probably would have just continued talking. So it's like I've learned this over the last few years, and what a gift that is. Wow. So thank you for that
Yeah.
huge, huge reminder. And I really hope that helps other people to realize that when they don't know what to say, it's okay to say that. Mm. And we spoke a bit about trust before. And I think that is a huge trust builder to be honest. And trust is something that's coming up in my research again and again. And I'm at the moment, my research is all about hybrid working and in connection and like building trust when it is mainly through a screen, and how challenging that can be, and how we do need some, face-to-face interaction to build that trust, and how different organizations are playing around with that. I wonder if there's anything else on trust that we could dig into.
I think what you just said, I really like was the different ways of building trust. I imagine it's scary to be in a leadership role and see a breakdown of trust and be like, what do I do? And easily just pick those go-to kind of activities. But to really sit down and find out like what's the reason, what's happening here, what are other ways that we can try and rebuild trust in here. And I definitely don't think I'm the answer, but I am a clue. I think improv is a seed that can be used as part of that rebuilding as well. Um, so I think, yeah, looking for different ways of building trust, and also people build trust themselves in different ways as well too. And I think that when we're thinking about inclusivity in workplaces, it's also thinking about learning styles or of course, there's the introvert, extrovert things to keep in mind as well. But this idea that people build trust in different ways and trust looks different for everybody at the same time, too. So there's not a one size fits all for, and now we all have trust. It's like, no, maybe it's a bit of a spectrum. I don't know. Like, I think it is when it comes to connections. Like, I have this much trust with this person and maybe a little bit less trust with this one. I'm still building it. And I think it's okay to again, like, speak the truth on that. We're building trust in different ways here. And yeah, those are my rambling thoughts on trust.
And like organizations that have gone through big change programs that every organization does, when that trust has eroded, like having an icebreaker,
Yeah.
like the improv, just to maybe the tension has just been building and building. And it's like you just need to do something for you all to just break out of that and
Yeah.
help to reset. And I know when I was living at the eco village for 4 months, it was it got quite overwhelming sometimes, particularly in the winter when we were inside and we'd be seeing, these other 15 humans 3 times a day. It was like, can be too much. And then on a Friday, we would have these heart circles and we'd sit around and we would be brutally just honest about whatever's coming up for us. And it was all about don't premeditate, just allow whatever wants to be said to be said. And you go around 3 times. And it always felt like on the Saturday, after being in that kind of trusted circle environment, there was a lightness that
Mm,
you then had with the other community members, that we know we see each other in a different way now.
yeah.
So it's almost like breaking that boundary, doing something that's going to get you in a different frame. And that can really help. Monday morning, you come into the office and you're not going to keep doing improv every day. Well, maybe some of them will, but it's kind of changed the dynamic. It's changed the tone.
Yeah. Yeah. It's given some new lenses too. I think it's just shifted that mindset because we all get, I think some of us more than others get set on that fixed mindset. And so it's breaking that, like you said, or shifting it, just cracking it a little bit and being like, hey, have you thought of it this way? Have you looked at it from this angle? And bringing that curiosity into it too.
Hmm.
Hmm.
So what's next? What's next? What's next in your world? Like what's in your on your vision board? Like what's the most exciting thing that you're working on that you're like, this is really going to shift things for me. It's going to shift things for the people that I serve.
Good question. I think part of what's driving me this year is I'm continuing to evolve what it is I'm offering for my clients and how it is I'm serving the people that I'm working with. And one thing for me is now to really look back at my full-time business in the past year and a half is what are people looking for? Like, what is it that these organizations and these leaders are seeking and like craving? And what's coming out of the work I'm doing with them, and being able to shift that more and bring that more into the light. So I think really focusing on the wonderful people that I've worked with already and learning from them what's out there, and maybe finding new ways of helping them or finding different ways, because I think improv can be used in so many different places and situations, and every time there's a new opportunity that comes, have you ever, like the visioning thing yesterday, I didn't bring any improv into that really, but bringing other areas of my training and my experience in, and I guess just finding, I always love evolving and learning and trying new things. And so I think part of it now is focusing though on the wonderful people I've worked with so far, and taking that knowledge and learning and moving it out back to them or into new people as well. Um, and I've been part of some networking groups locally now for, it's been a full year. And so I feel like, okay, I've settled in. It's kind of like when you move to a new country. I feel like the first year you're like, what is this? Oh, and you're always just like a step behind everything. Something cool happens and you make a note for next year. And it's year two where you kind of settle in and you really find your home and your
Mm.
space and your people. And I think that's kind of the stage I'm in my business with it as a full-time business now, is that like, okay, I know what's coming. How am I really going to where are the bits I'm going to thrive in and really put my focus and my energy into as well.
And we mentioned about some virtual improv groups, but for those listeners in Victoria, are there any groups that you've joined that you've really felt at home in, and you're like, these are going to, continue to be a fixture in my weekly or monthly diary that other people might want to check out?
Yeah. I mean, I think for myself, and I think for anybody, it really comes down to the people in the room, and how the space is kind of held and run, if it's like a free form one or if there's a teacher. So that that's been a journey for me as I rediscover the communities in Victoria. But I will say, I always recommend Paper Street Theater. I really love the improv they do, because it is, as Dave Morris, their founder, says, it's improv that feels like theater. And so it's all genre-based theater, and he does really interesting, unique formats, and with all those range of authentic emotions like we talked about. So definitely they do shows and workshops as well. I always think that's a great place to start. But it is not a comedy focused improv. So if you want to do comedy focused improv, then I would highly recommend my friend Alexandra Foreman, who does Okay Dope. They do comedy and improv, and Alex runs a series of workshops, even for kids now too. And so if you're looking a bit more, if you enjoy the comedy aspect of it, she teaches a style that is much more comedy focused, and they have shows every week. They have numerous shows happening at the Mint downtown. So it's yeah, there's different,
Amazing.
those are my
Yeah.
two that I'd
And
recommend.
are you fully focused on kind of the corporate space, or do you do any stuff for general kind of consumers or children yourself?
Oh yeah, great question. So my side hustle that I love to do out of passion is actually improv for seniors. So I do it
Oh,
for at various senior centers in town. Some of them are all ages, some are more senior focused, like Silver Threads, and sometimes I do Monterey Rec and Oak Bay. I also work in some retirement communities and do workshops for them, and a memory cafe, which works with people living with memory loss. So there is that kind of community side. So it's a bit more focused on seniors in that sense.
yeah, I love that. I love that. And I imagine those events would be really satisfying.
Oh, they're incredible. I mean, it's generally women who come, which is interesting. You imagine a room full of women who are 60, 70, 80, 90 even, and they're going back to their childhood. They are just, everything's coming up, and they have so much experience and wisdom to share, and they're so reflective, and they love this like breaking out of their shell, and yeah, it's such a joy. I love that space as well. So, yeah.
Amazing. Oh, I'm so glad to know that of you. Brett, is there anything coming up for you that maybe we just haven't touched on that you think in the realm of connection, rediscovering connection, whether that's personal, professional, is there anything coming up that you just really want to share with our listeners here?
I think the only thing coming up is I encourage everyone to try an improv class at some point in their life. No matter what your age is, give it a try, whether it's a drop in or a 4 week class or something. I just think everyone can learn something from those experiences. And it may be that you do it once and you think, well, that was interesting and I'll never do it again. But that's okay. I think it's worth, you don't have to perform. Just go and experience the joy, the connection, the vulnerability, the kind of stretching that comfort zone and the pride that you feel having done something that feels a bit scary. But you're going to come out of there feeling joyful and connected at least to some people in the group. So I think that's it. I encourage everyone to give it a try.
I'm sold. I'm coming. And
Excellent.
meanwhile, I'm doing like improvised podcasting. So I've had a good, this has been my warm up.
Perfect.
Thank you, Brett. It's been a pleasure to get to know you a little bit deeper and get to know your work. So thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me, Shelley.